The fires in the village spread wider, casting the night in shifting red light and thick smoke. The fighters shouted to one another, their voices edged with panic, as the unseen sniper cut them down one by one. Maren pressed her body low behind the collapsed wall, her rifle steady, her eyes scanning for the leader again. She knew the balance of the fight depended on breaking him, but his men guarded him closely, weaving through the chaos like wolves shielding their alpha. The SEALs remained bound. Near the fire, their faces streaked with sweat, their bodies tense. One of them caught her movement in the shadows, their eyes locking across the distance, his gaze sharp and unflinching, as though he recognized something in the calm of her stare, though he could not yet know who she was. He nodded ever so slightly, as if acknowledging an ally in the chaos. And Maren felt the silent weight of their hope pressing against her. Gunfire cracked across the night bullets, slicing through the hut splinters. Raining down near her face, the fighters had closed the circle, hunting her through the flames, their torches swinging like wild lanterns. Maren drew her blade as she slipped from the cover, moving soundlessly toward the nearest alley. A fighter lunged into her path, his rifle raised, but she struck before he could fire, the blade sharp and quick, his body falling into the dust as she dragged him into shadow. The shouts grew louder, men calling out the loss of another guard, rifles rattling in blind. Bursts across the huts, Maren slipped further inside the maze of smoke, her lungs burning with the heat. Each breath thick and heavy, she wiped the sweat from her brow and steadied her hands again. She thought of the SEALs bound and waiting there, strength trapped by rope, their eyes still searching the darkness for a way out, and she promised herself she would cut those ropes no matter the cost. She reached the outer ring of guards where two fighters stood, with rifles at the ready, their eyes sharp scanning every flicker of shadow. Maren crouched behind a pile of crates, her rifle dismantled and tucked away. Her hands gripping the hilt of her blade, she waited for the gap, the single moment when their attention split. One stepped aside to light a cigarette, and in that breath she struck from behind, her blade swift, her body low, her silence absolute, as one man collapsed before the other realized what was happening. The second fighter turned, his rifle lifting, but her hand shot up, grabbing the barrel, forcing it aside as the shot exploded into the dirt. She twisted the weapon away, driving her knee into his chest, the force sending him crashing back against the crates. She pressed the blade to his throat, silencing him before he could call out, her pulse hammering, yet her movements smooth her body. Remembering every drill, every lesson from years ago, she pulled the weapon into her own hands and melted back into the smoke. She was close now, the prisoners only yards away, the fighters still clustered in confusion around their leader, who barked furious commands, his men scrambling to obey, his scarred face lit by the glow of fire, his eyes wild with rage. Maren steadied herself, rifle raised once more, but before she could fire, the leader yanked one of the SEALs to his knees, pressing a pistol to the soldier's head, shouting for the ghost in the shadows to reveal herself or watch him die. The air seemed to freeze. The fighters went silent, the fire crackling. The only sound, Maren's heart pounded as she stared through her scope, the leader's finger resting on the trigger. The SEAL on his knees, his jaw clenched, his eyes steady, as though he accepted what was to come. She knew if she hesitated a heartbeat longer, he would fall and the mission would collapse with him. Yet the shot was risky, the angle narrow, the chance of failure unbearable. She breathed deep, slowing her pulse, remembering the calm she had once been taught, that in the storm only stillness could guide the strike. Her crosshairs steady, her finger curling on the trigger as the leader screamed into the night, demanding her surrender. Her lips tightened as she whispered a single word to herself. Then she pulled the trigger, and the pistol fell from his hand as the man staggered back. His grip broken by the shot, chaos erupted again. Fighters rushing to shield their leader, shouting in confusion as the SEAL on his knees twisted away, throwing his shoulder into the guard beside him. The prisoners surged with sudden force. Their bonds strained, but their discipline fierce even bound. They moved as one bodies crashing against their captors. The fighters struggled to contain them, the circle broken in an instant by the precision of her shot and the fury of soldiers unwilling to surrender. Merrin moved quickly. Her rifle slung her blade flashing as she cut through the last shadows. Her breath ragged, the smoke thick, her eyes locked on the prisoners still bound, but now fighting. With everything they had, she knew she had only moments before the fighters regained control, and she was determined to reach them before that moment came. The fire roared higher, the village shaking with shouts and gunfire, the storm at its peak, and Merrin pushed forward knowing the final step was near, but also knowing that with every second the danger pressed closer around her and the fight had only begun. Merrin burst from the smoke, her blade cutting through the rope that bound the first seal, his wrists snapping free as he caught the falling weapon from her hand. His eyes fierce and filled with sudden fire. The others turned toward her, their bonds straining as the flames rose behind them, her movements precise, her breath ragged, yet her focus sharper than ever. She knew this was the only chance to shift the tide. The leader stumbled, clutching his injured hand, his eyes burning with hatred as he roared for his men to hold the line. The fighters surged forward, their rifles cracking. Through the night, their boots pounding the dirt as the smoke swirled around them. Merrin dropped low, pulling another seal to his feet, his muscles trembling with exhaustion, yet his spirit unbroken together. They moved like wolves breaking free from a cage. The clash in the center of the burning village erupted into chaos, fists striking rifles, firing men grappling in the dust and smoke. Merrin spun through the melee, each movement a memory of countless drills, her blade flashing her eyes never, leaving the scarred leader who rallied his men with rage. The seals, though weakened by captivity, moved with raw discipline, turning broken branches and captured rifles into weapons of their own, as though they had trained for this very moment. The flames illuminated the desperation on every face, shadows leaping against the broken walls. The villagers who had been hiding now peered from the edges, their eyes wide as the fight raged before them. They saw a woman standing alone against a wave of armed men, her figure unshaken, her resolve unbroken. The whispers carried in the smoke, a ghost, a shadow, a savior come from nowhere. Merrin pressed forward, closing the distance between herself and the leader, her rifle lifted once more, but his men swarmed around him, forming a living wall, their shouts echoing through the burning huts. He raised his pistol again, his wounded hand shaking, yet his finger locked with fury. He aimed not at her, but at the seal nearest him, forcing her to choose between her target and the lives she swore to save. The decision carved itself in a heartbeat. Her shot rang out, the guard collapsing into the dust, the pistol veering away, the seal diving for cover as the wall of fighters cracked open for a single instant. Merrin charged through, blade in hand, her boots striking the dirt, her eyes locked on the scarred face before her. He turned just in time to see the fury in her gaze. Their struggle clashed in the center of the fire, his strength brute and furious, her precision sharp and relentless. His fist crashed against her arm, forcing her blade wide. Her knee drove upward, breaking his stance. They fell together into the dirt, grappling for control, the seals still bound, but rising behind them, their voices shouting as the fighters faltered in confusion, watching their leader locked in combat with the ghost they could not defeat. The ground trembled with their struggle, his hand clawing for her rifle, her grip unyielding, the smoke stinging her eyes. She remembered the silence of her training, the calm before the storm. She let the fury settle into stillness. Her movement, a single fluid strike, the blade flashing across the night, his body stiffening. His roar, turning into silence, the fire reflecting in his eyes before he collapsed into the dust. The fighters froze, shock spreading across their faces, the weight of their leader's fall, breaking their spirit. The seals seized the moment, surging forward, ropes snapping under blades, their voices rising. In a roar of defiance, they struck with sudden freedom, each movement fueled by rage and relief. Marin rose to her feet, chest heaving, blade dripping smoke curling around her, as the men who had once mocked the ghost now faced the truth of her strength. Some fighters fled into the darkness, abandoning weapons and torches. Others stood frozen, their courage shattered by the fall of the man they feared most. The villagers stepped cautiously from their hiding places, whispering with disbelief, their eyes on the woman who stood with the seals, their voices carrying the story even as it was written in the fire and the dust. A woman alone had broken the circle and the night itself.